The day I hit $1.4 million wasn't cinematic. There were no champagne pops, no Ferraris, and no private jets. There was just a quiet, deafening realization. I owned every single second of my remaining time on Earth, and no boss could ever buy it back from me. But 19 years earlier, I was staring at a net worth of exactly zero. I was 22 years old, clutching my first real paycheck of $3,400, and I was convinced of a lie. I thought more income would fix my life. I thought a higher salary was the escape hatch. I was wrong. If you are sitting there thinking that your financial struggle is an income problem, you've already lost the game. It is a structural problem. Most people spend 2 decades building a more expensive cage, not a ladder. They double their salary and somehow double their stress. They see a market dip and liquidate their future out of fear. In this video, I am pulling back the curtain on the exact 19-year timeline that took me from $0 to $1.4 million and permanent retirement at age 41. I'm going to show you how I survived a 30% market crash without selling a single share, and how I managed to keep lifestyle creep from strangling my freedom even as my income skyrocketed. We are going to break down the mathematical framework of the FIRE movement, the automated index fund strategy that makes wealth inevitable, and the psychological discipline required to handle job losses, family emergencies, and the soul-crushing burnout of the corporate grind. How do you turn a standard paycheck into unbossed, unscheduled time? Why is the habit of saving actually 10 times more powerful than the amount you earn? And what is the one structural shift you must make today to ensure you aren't working until the day you die? The math works. The system works. But you have to decide if you're ready to see the blueprint. Let's look at the numbers. Let's go back to that $3,400 paycheck. To a 22-year-old, that felt like an infinite resource. I remember looking at my bank balance and thinking, I've made it. I did what everyone tells you to do. I got the entry-level corporate job, I wore the cheap suits, and I started upgrading. The logic is seductive. You tell yourself, I work hard, I deserve a nicer apartment. I'm an adult now, I shouldn't be driving a car with a manual window crank. So, you move into the downtown loft. You trade the 10-year-old Toyota for a lease on something German. You start ordering the $14 cocktails instead of the $4 beers. And for a second, it feels like progress. It looks like success. But here is the dirty secret of the American middle class. I wasn't getting richer. I was just becoming a higher quality servant. Every time my salary went up, my needs miraculously rose to meet it. This is what we call lifestyle creep. But that term is too gentle. It's more like a parasitic infection. It's a structural flaw in the way we are conditioned to live. We are taught to measure our standard of living by our consumption, but we never measure the cost of that consumption in life force. Think about it. If you earn $30 an hour, that $60 dinner isn't just $60. It's 2 hours of your life. 2 hours where you had to sit in a cubicle, deal with a passive-aggressive manager, and navigate office politics. When you buy a $40,000 car on a 5-year loan, you aren't buying a vehicle. You are signing a contract to stay chained to your desk for the next 2,000 hours of your waking life just to pay for the metal and the leather. I spent the first 3 years of my career in this trance. I was earning more every year, yet I felt more trapped. I had golden handcuffs. My net worth was hovering around zero because every dollar that came in was already spoken for by a landlord, a bank, or a credit card company. I was living the American dream, and it felt like a slow-motion suffocation. The breaking point didn't come from a financial guru. It came from a Tuesday afternoon in a windowless conference room. I looked around at my senior managers, people in their 50s earning 3 times what I made, and I saw the truth. They weren't free. They were the most trapped people in the building. They had the biggest mortgages, the most expensive private school tuitions, and the most fear in their eyes when restructuring was mentioned. They couldn't afford to quit. They couldn't even afford to speak their minds. I realized then that if I followed the standard path, my 40s wouldn't be a time of freedom. They would be a time of maximum vulnerability. I started obsessively tracking where every cent went. I realized that the math we are sold is a lie. We're told to save 10% of our income and we'll be fine by age 65. But do the math. If you save 10%, you have to work 9 years to pay for 1 year of living expenses. That's a 45-year sentence. It's not a wealth strategy, it's a controlled depletion of your youth. I began to look for a different way. I found the math of the gap, the space between what you earn and what you spend. I realized that if I could widen that gap and pour the difference into boring, low-cost index funds, the math would eventually hit a tipping point where the money worked harder than I did. But there was a problem. A massive problem. The world is designed to prevent you from widening that gap. Every advertisement, every social media post, and every well-meaning friend is a pressure point trying to force you to spend. To win, I didn't just need a spreadsheet, I needed a psychological bunker. I had to learn how to be weird. I had to learn how to say no to the status symbols that everyone else used to prove they were doing well. For the next decade, I lived in the boring middle. I automated my investments. I ignored the hot stocks. I watched my friends buy houses I knew they couldn't afford while I stayed in my modest apartment, shoveling every extra dollar into the market. I watched the market swing wildly. I saw my portfolio drop by 6 figures in a month during the 2008 to 2009 crisis. The pressure to do something, to sell, to hedge, to panic was overwhelming. Everyone around me was liquidating, convinced the world was ending. But this is where the strategy either lives or dies. Most people think the hardest part of hitting $1.4 million is the investing part. They think you need to be a math genius or have some secret in with a hedge fund. They think you need to find the next Amazon or Bitcoin. But here is the reality that no one wants to admit, and it's the truth that changed everything for me. The biggest obstacle to your financial freedom isn't the stock market, it isn't the economy, and it isn't your low salary. The biggest obstacle is that you are currently addicted to the standard of living lie. You've been told that to be successful, you have to look successful. But in the world of true wealth, looking successful is the fastest way to stay broke. In fact, if you want to be part of the 1% who actually owns their time, you have to start doing the exact opposite of what the 99% considers normal. So I stopped trying to impress people I didn't even like. I made a choice that felt like social suicide at the time. I decided to live on 50% of my income. The math of a 50% savings rate is a cheat code for reality. If you save 50%, for every year you work, you buy 1 year of freedom. It's a 1-to-1 trade. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just working for a paycheck. I was buying back my future in 365-day increments. I stopped looking at my bank balance in terms of dollars and started looking at it in terms of time left to serve. But living on half your income in a world designed to take 100% of it is a brutal psychological war. My friends were moving into 3-bedroom houses with manicured lawns. I stayed in a 1-bedroom apartment where the heater rattled like a chainsaw. They were posting photos of their Italian vacations. I was posting another $2,000 into a Vanguard Total Stock Market Index fund. I was winning the math, but I was losing the social status game. And that's the first major payoff you need to understand. Financial independence isn't a destination you reach. It's a person you become. You have to be okay with being the poor friend in the room while secretly being the only one who actually owns their life. But then, the math got real. I hit the first $100,000. Charlie Munger once said the first $100,000 is a total bitch, and he wasn't exaggerating. It took me nearly 7 years to get there. It felt like pushing a boulder up a vertical cliff. I was saving, scraping, and sacrificing, and the needle barely moved. Compound interest is a backloaded miracle. In those early years, your contributions are doing 99% of the work. The money itself is just sitting there, lazy and stagnant. But once I crossed that $100,000 threshold, the physics changed. The boulder hit the crest of the hill. Suddenly, a 7% market return meant my portfolio was earning $7,000 a year, more than 2 months of my entire living expenses, without me lifting a finger. That was the moment the golden handcuffs started to feel a little loose. I realized that if I could just keep the structural integrity of my life in place, if I could keep my expenses flat while my portfolio grew, the end was inevitable. Then 2008 happened. The global financial system began to melt down. I watched my portfolio, which I had bled for, drop by 35% in a matter of months. I saw 6 figures of wealth vanish into the digital ether. My coworkers were panicking. People were selling everything, moving to cash and swearing off the stock market forever. This is the point where 90% of people fail. They have the math, but they don't have the stomach. I had to make a choice. Trust the 100-year history of the U.S. economy, or trust the screaming headlines on CNBC. I chose the history. I didn't just stay in, I doubled down. I lived on even less. I bought more shares of the total market while they were on sale for 40% off. It felt like throwing money into a black hole, but I knew the rule of 25. If you want to know how much you need to retire, you multiply your annual expenses by 25. That's the 4% rule. If you can live on 4% of your total portfolio, you statistically never run out of money. My number was $1.2 million. Every dollar I invested during that crash wasn't just a dollar. It was a seed for a tree that would eventually shade me from the corporate sun forever. By 2015, the recovery was in full swing. My portfolio didn't just bounce back, it exploded. I was in the boring middle, that decade-long stretch where you just execute the plan. No fancy trades, no crypto moonshots. Just automated transfers and a refusal to upgrade my car. But as the numbers climbed, a new, more dangerous enemy appeared, the one more year syndrome. I had hit $800,000, then $900,000. I was closer to freedom than I had ever been, but the fear was shifting. It wasn't the fear of being poor anymore, it was the fear of letting go. My salary was at an all-time high. I was a senior something or other. I had the corner office I used to dream about. The irony was suffocating. I finally had the success I thought I wanted at 22, but all I wanted was to walk out the door and never look back. I started to realize that the hardest part of the FIRE journey isn't the saving or the investing, it's the deprogramming. You have spent 20 years being told that your value is tied to your productivity. You've been conditioned to think that a gap on your resume is a stain on your character. I was staring at $1 million on a screen, and I was still terrified of what people would think if I told them I was retired at 40. I was scared that without a job title, I would be a nobody. This is the climax of the journey. This is where the structural problem becomes a spiritual problem. I had the money. The math was finished. The 19-year timeline was complete. I had $1.4 million sitting in low-cost index funds, throwing off enough dividends to pay for my life 3 times over. I was technically, mathematically, and legally free. But I still found myself sitting in that same windowless conference room on a Tuesday afternoon, listening to a vice president talk about synergy and quarterly deliverables. I looked at my bank account on my phone under the table. I had the exit ramp right in front of me. All I had to do was say the words. So why couldn't I do it? Because the standard of living lie has a second half. It's not just about the things you buy, it's about the identity you wear. To truly be free, you don't just have to kill your debt, you have to kill your ego. I realized that if I didn't quit now, I would become just like those 55-year-old managers I had pitied 2 decades ago. I would be the guy with the biggest house and the smallest soul. I walked into my boss's office the next morning. I didn't have a new job lined up. I didn't have a side hustle that was making six figures. I just had a spreadsheet, a 19-year history of discipline, and the realization that my time was worth more than his money. I resigned, and that's when the real work began. Because once you have $1.4 million and no boss, you realize something terrifying. You no longer have anyone else to blame for your unhappiness. The cage is gone. Now, you have to figure out what you actually want to do with the 40 years of life force you just bought back. Most people think the story ends when the bank account hits the number. But the number is just the beginning of a much harder question. A question that most people are too busy working to ever ask themselves. The one structural shift you must make today, the single pivot that separates those who retire at 40 from those who die at their desks, is the transition from being a consumer of products to being an owner of assets. Most people spend their lives on the wrong side of the equation. They are the fuel for someone else's engine. When you buy the German car, you are paying the dividends of the person who owns the stock in that car company. When you pay interest on a credit card, you are funding the early retirement of a bank shareholder. The moment I hit that $1.4 million mark, the architecture of my reality flipped. I stopped being the fuel and became the engine. Those 19 years weren't about deprival, they were about a fundamental realignment of what I valued. I realized that the standard of living we are sold is actually a standard of compliance. They want you to have the high mortgage and the luxury lease because a man with nothing to lose is a man they cannot control. But a man with a $1.4 million portfolio and a paid-off life? He is the most dangerous person in the economy. He is unbuyable. When I look back at that $3,400 paycheck now, I don't see an infinite resource. I see the first brick in a fortress. The math of the FIRE movement, the 4% rule, the index funds, the 50% savings rate. It isn't just a financial strategy. It is an emancipation proclamation. It works because it relies on the only thing in the universe more powerful than human greed, compound interest. But you have to give it time to work. You have to survive the boring middle. You have to sit still while the market screams that the world is ending. You have to be willing to look unsuccessful to your neighbors so that you can be truly powerful in your own home. The quiet, deafening realization I had on the day I hit my number wasn't that I was rich. It was that the world no longer had a claim on my focus. I think about those Tuesday afternoons in the conference room. I think about the managers who were too afraid to speak up because they were one missed paycheck away from losing the image they had worked 30 years to build. I realized now that they weren't the villains of the story. They were the victims of a structural lie. They chose the shadow of wealth over the substance of freedom. Wealth is not the car you drive. It is not the watch on your wrist. It is not the title on your business card. Wealth is the silence of an alarm clock that doesn't go off. It is the ability to spend a rainy Wednesday reading a book because you want to, not because you're on break. It is the power to be present for your family without a laptop glowing in the corner of the room. It is the absolute ironclad ownership of your life force. The system is designed to keep you running. It is designed to make you feel that your income problem is the only thing holding you back. But the exit ramp is right there. It's built on the gap. It's built on the rule of 25. It's built on the boring, repetitive, and disciplined habit of buying the world's economy through index funds and refusing to let the world buy you. You don't need a miracle. You don't need a lucky break. You don't need to be the next tech billionaire. You just need the courage to be weird for a decade or two. You need the discipline to prioritize your 50-year-old self over your current ego. The math is finished. The blueprint is sitting on the table. The only variable left in the equation is your willingness to stop building someone else's cage and start building your own ladder. Every dollar you save today is a soldier you are sending into the future to fight for your freedom. Every no you say to a status symbol is a yes to a Tuesday morning you own. The 19 years I spent getting to $1.4 million weren't a sacrifice. They were an investment in the only asset that actually matters, the remaining seconds of my life. I own them all now, every single one. And I promise you, the view from the other side of the standard of living lie is better than any luxury car could ever feel. The cage is open. It always was. You just had to stop decorating it long enough to walk out. Walking out of that cage is only the first step. The harder part is refusing to walk back in when the world starts dangling new, shinier bars in front of your face. Most people will watch this, feel a momentary spark of rebellion, and then go right back to funding someone else's early retirement, because the momentum of the status quo is a relentless force. This channel exists to be your counter-momentum. We don't deal in get-rich-quick schemes or the latest speculative hype that promises a shortcut but delivers a dead end. We focus on the structural architecture of true freedom, the deep-level math, the psychological bunker building, and the tactical execution of the boring middle. If you are ready to stop being the fuel for a system that views your life as a line item and start becoming the engine of your own existence, you need to be here for the next breakdown. I am going to continue pulling back the curtain on the specific index fund allocations that survived the crashes, the exact spreadsheets I use to measure my freedom in days rather than dollars, and the mental frameworks required to stay disciplined when everyone else is panicking. This isn't just a video series, it's a manual for the unbuyable. If you've made the decision that your remaining time on this planet is no longer for sale, then you've already started the shift. But to finish the journey, you need to stay tethered to the strategy, not the noise. By staying connected to this channel, you're ensuring that the blueprint remains in front of you every single week. The cage is open, but the world is waiting to pull you back in. Don't let it. Let's keep looking at the numbers and let's keep building that ladder. I'll see you in the next deep dive.